Good evening, everyone, and welcome. My name is Colin von Liebtag, and I head up the Alumni Career Development Program for the Rutgers University Alumni Association and the Office of Career Exploration and Success, formerly University Career Services. I thank you all for being with us this evening and hope you are all safe and healthy. During this time of social distancing, the Rutgers University Alumni Association is offering virtual programs to help keep alumni connected. Tonight, we are honored to have with us Rick Herron and Andy Gogates to speak with us about how to make retirement work. And it really is a pleasure to be working with Rick and Andy on this. I've had the good fortune to know them for a number of years now, and they really are two world-class, best in the business gentlemen. The program that they've prepared for us is really about how to not just retire happy, but maintain that happiness through purpose, meaning, and enjoying what you do post-career. Rick and Andy have a total of more than 80 years of experience in helping people, from brand new college graduates to seasoned senior executives, and helping them make successful transitions to new and exciting opportunities. Here's a little bit of a brief bio on each, and then I'll turn it over to Rick and Andy for a little bit further info. Rick Herron is a veteran career education professional who currently serves as the executive director of University Career Services at Rutgers. He was the director of the University Career Center at the University of Maryland in College Park, Maryland. He also has held similar positions at Miami University in Ohio and Ohio Northern University. He was also a captain in the U.S. Army, serving in both domestic and international assignments. Thank you for your service, Rick. Andy Gogates is a talent acquisition recruitment professional recently retired as the manager of corporate relations for Rutgers Business School in Newark, New Jersey. Previously, he was the founder of the Gogates Group, Inc., a retained executive search firm whose clients were in the alternative investment community and completed assignments for hedge funds, investment banks, family offices, and private investment funds. He began his career on Wall Street as a recruiter for U.S. Trust, Goldman Sachs, and Bankers Trust. And just again, as a quick reminder, all attendees have been placed on mute and videos have been disabled for the duration of this discussion and program. If you have questions, please send them via the Q&A option at the bottom of your screen throughout the presentation. And then I'll collect them all at the end, and I'll share them with Rick and Andy following their presentation. And we'll get to as many of those questions as we can. It is now my privilege to turn it over to Rick and Andy. Please take it away, gentlemen.
Good evening, everyone. This is Rick Herron. It's wonderful to be with you this evening. We're delighted that you've been able to make some time available to spend it with us to learn how to make retirement work. Colin, always great to work with you in your many different capacities here at the university. So thank you for that kind introduction.
Good evening, everyone. This is Andy Gogates. Rick and I'm also a Rutgers graduate and work there, so I don't know what that makes me. But I spent a good portion of my time early in my career, as Colin mentioned, in Wall Street. I was an executive recruiter. And a number of years ago, both of us worked at Rutgers, Rick and I. We had an opportunity to meet each other. And many of you are probably thinking, why are we doing this? And the key is that we both met at a joint event. We both started speaking. We both looked at each other and realized we're both baby boomers. We both decided that we had a lot of in common. We had a lot of things that we did together. Both came out of the career management world. And we ended up having a nice discussion about retirement. We're at the same age, we're similar age, that has been in the forefront of our thought process of what do we do next. And so we both are very much involved and have been involved in our careers in transitions. And this is just another transition. I worked in executive search as well as on the career side at the MBA level. And so transitions is something that we're moving people from one particular job or point in their life to something else. Rick has been doing that for many, many years at the undergraduate level. What happens is in retirement, as we had the discussion, a lot of it was we get a lot of information on the financial aspects. I still get information from banks and investment firms about, please, they want to manage my money. But we found that there was less to talk about. What do you do when you retire? What's this retirement thing all about? We came across this article that is written by Neil Pasricha, Harvard Business Review, and I'd read this just prior to meeting Rick, actually, in 2016. And we'll get a little bit more about it later, but his whole concept is, why is retirement a failed concept? And it really is a phenomenon that's fairly new, retirement, in that it is not something that has been along, been around forever. But you keep an eye on this this slide. You'll see a lot more of it later.
You can't investigate the concept of retirement without learning a little bit about the baby boomers. That was certainly one of our first discoveries as we went through this process, which itself was a fairly lengthy process of discovery. So, couple of quiz questions here, since we do represent a university, and universities give quizzes, and that kind of stuff never ends. So, for the quiz question here, if you will, is, which birth years represent the baby boom generation? I'll give you a chance to think about that for a minute. But actually, it's 1946 to 1964, fairly long span of years as generation markers are concerned. So 46 to 64 is the group that we're talking about with respect to the baby boom generation.
Of course, now we had baby boomer generation, but how many boomers are in that period? How many does that mean between the 46 to 64? And that number is 72.5 million. 72.5 million boomers that were born during that time period.
Now, this is a statistic that really blew our mind when we came upon it. And I can't remember exactly where we came upon it. I think it was when we were doing some research with the Social Security Administration. But but one of the things that is that starting in 2011, 10,000 Americans turned 65 every single day. 10,000 a day. Now, then we learned that that phenomenon will continue day by day, all the way until 2030. And in fact, where the baby boomers are concerned, we're only halfway through that marker of 65. So that's a very, very long time in terms of contemporary timekeeping, if you will, and suggests just how important this concept of making retirement work is concerned. 2011 to 2030, every day, 10,000 turn 65 years of age.
Many of you, I assume, are probably baby boomers like Rick and I are, but we're always interested in the Generation X, which is the ones right behind us. So the years that encompass Generation X period is 65 to 80. Gen Xers are right behind us. So it's only 10 years from now that they will be involved in similar thought process. So this could be that any of you that are in that Gen X period will be interested in hearing what we have to say as well. Came across this statistic that was in the U.S. Census Bureau. So if you actually look at the baby boomer generation, if you guys can follow my cursor here, baby boomer generation, it's 72.5 million were born then. And then Generation X, which is right behind us, which I always thought was a very interesting statistic because 10 million fewer babies were born during the Gen X generation. So this is something I come from the employment side of the business. So this I thought was interesting. There's fewer people available to do jobs. As the boomers are moving out into this retirement phase or the next phase in their life, the Gen Xers, there's not enough human beings, not just qualified, but not enough human beings. So those of you that may be interested in doing something in a job category later on and continue to work, there may be a tremendous opportunity. I mentioned in the beginning that retirement is a fairly new concept. It was really Otto von Bismarck, who was the German chancellor in 1889, came up with this concept. And I didn't get there's not a lot of information about exactly the time frame, but my thought is that at that point, 1889, we had a lot of factories, we had a lot of assembly lines, and there was no retirement. You basically worked until you dropped dead, or you worked until you could go and stay with your kids, or you couldn't physically work anymore. And then someone, a younger person, could come in and fill at the bottom level. Otto von Bismarck came up with this idea that at the latter part of your life, that you should have some enjoyment and provided some compensation from the government for those people as they got older to be able to enjoy themselves. And they had to come up with a number, and they came up with 65. And the only reason they came up with 65 is because he was 65 and he felt like an old guy. So that's the reason they came up with it. And interestingly enough, they used age 65 as the standard retirement age for the Social Security Act, which was in 1935. Mathematically, it does work because you look at the numbers and you run the actuarial tables. It does make sense because the people with the younger generations will support those that are 65 and above. Of course, at 65 back in 1889, there probably weren't as many. Obviously, there weren't as many, and also you didn't live as long. So it wasn't as if you had to pay for a long period of time.
As we continue this whole process, we discovered that we have some good news.
And we have some bad news.
Good news is we're living longer.
The bad news, we're living longer. Rick, you can chuckle. This is where you always think that's pretty funny. One of the other interesting things we found is that the difference between our retirement years and our parents, it's significantly longer than the previous generation, which would make sense. Medical profession has gotten a lot more sophisticated, and we are definitely living longer. Right now, men age 65, because this came out of Social Security Administration in 2019, which they follow, men reaching 65 now, this year, can expect to live until 84 and a half. Women reaching 65 can expect to live to 86 and a half. That's a pretty big number. And when you look at your retirement money, if you think about it, boy, I can live to 85. That is, and that's average. A lot of people are living a heck of a lot longer.
So the question inevitably comes, what do we do with all this extra time, the time that we have? And so that's where we began to kind of refocus our study of this whole process of making retirement work. And it actually led us to a concept called the 3 boxes of life, which we'd love to be able to take credit for, but actually is a concept that was developed by Richard Nelson Bowles, who some of you know is the author of the perennial bestseller for many, many years, What Color is Your Parachute, along with John Crystal, who who conceptualized this whole process of how we view time through our lifespan. And so when we talk about the three boxes of life, we talk about first, typically education. You know, we begin there. The first part of our lives are spent with a focus on education, at least up through high school, and for many people, all the way up through postgraduate school. Big blocks of time. And then the next block is, or the next box is work, where most will spend, 30 years, 40 years, some cases longer in work. And then once our work lives are over, then we get to enjoy the fruits of our labor in retirement. So you can see this is kind of a vertical construct where it moves up from our early days to our retirement years in a vertical kind of way. And we're going to ask that you hang on to this conceptualization of of time and what time means.
So part of this is bringing us back to this slide that I asked you to remember. Neil Pasricha wrote this article back in 2016, and what started his whole thought process about retirement, why it's a flawed concept, is it began because he had found out in Okinawa, Japan, people live 6 or 7 years longer than anyone else, anyone in the United States. He wanted to know why that is. So they formed a team and they went to Okinawa, did a survey, did a study. And right away, my thought would be, well, the reason is because it's climate and probably the food, fish and rice for that society. Could be a number of other factors. And there were some of those factors, but the bulk of the factor that made a difference was that it was something they called IKIGAI. IKIGAI is pronounced IKIGAI. That's how it looks different than it is. But IKIGAI is loosely translated. It's a reason to get up in the morning. It's a purpose. You don't go from one phase of working to nothing to sitting around. It's really society doesn't have a word. You basically move to another phase. Now, the phase may not be making money. The phase may be doing something else for society. There's a responsibility to society. And Rick and I got very intrigued with that because that just seemed to make a lot of sense. You live longer because you had a reason for living. That seemed to make a lot of sense. Rick, you're up.
Okay, and the definition of ikigai can be a little bit tricky, but there's actually a graphic representation of this Eastern concept that we wanted to share with you, so that we could help you make some sense of what the concept actually entails. And as you'll see here shortly in this graphic that we've prepared, um, it it begins with a concept of that which you love, okay, and then it progresses in a Venn diagram kind of way to include that which the world needs, and in turn that which you're good at, and then finally that which you can be paid for. So this is kind of these are the overriding pillars of the Ikigai concept, but they're augmented by some more straightforward kinds of concepts that start with passion, and then mission, and then those evolve kind of in a compounding way into vocation, and into profession. So this is the Eastern concept of IKIGAI, and people who live their lives according to this Eastern concept realize the benefits IKIGAI concept. So that's one of the reasons why the Okinawans don't need to have a definition for retirement. There's nothing in this graphic depiction that suggests retirement per se. But what we'd like to do is to in terms of an American culture, a Western culture, and how that relates to the way we typically look at retirement and enter retirement.
So the same concepts still exist, but you notice the bottom circle is darker, so that in retirement you do still that what you love. That's what the world needs. That's what you're good at. You still have a passion between what you love and what you're good at. You still have a mission with what you love and what the world needs. You were working. You had the vocation. You had the profession. Still ikigai, but in retirement, you're not getting paid for it. So this Venn diagram then changes to the next piece, which would be in retirement, but it still holds most of those circles together. Still have that which you love, that which the world needs, that's which provides for our daily endeavors. The mission, same as before. Purpose, all again, ikigai. These three represent what it would be in the retirement side.
And as we study this more, we've learned that this is a process that develops from within. If you try to make it happen, if you try to force it to happen, it won't work. It's much more of a reflective type of process, where we advise our clients to take the time to reflect and to kind of ponder the things that are important to them, so that the 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 definition for retirement for individuals that we work with evolves instead of being imposed per se. And the other thing too that people get a little bit hung up on is this whole idea of having of knowing your purpose. Um, there's a distinction, and we think it's a distinction with a difference between knowing your purpose and having a purpose, with the latter being the most important. Having a sense of purpose will propel you through your retirement years, we believe, in fulfilling and enjoyable ways. So you don't have to go nuts trying to figure out your purpose, but you'll want to have a sense of purpose as you go through your retirement years.
So many of you are now probably thinking, okay, Rick and Eddie, that all sounds wonderful. I know it. I'm in the retirement phase. I'm going to be retiring soon, and I don't know what to do. So what do we do? What's the way forward? How do we move to the next phase, and how do we get into that to be having that purpose and everything that we've discussed so far? So we have taken and looked at the three boxes of life that we mentioned before, and we're going to revisit them, take a look at them a little bit differently. So we think that every day when you retire, you should learn something. You should have some leisure. I'm still trying to build my handicap. That makes sense. Nothing wrong with that. You deserve it. You also should have some labor. The labor doesn't mean work. It can mean work. It can mean getting paid for it. But it means that you're doing something physical. It could be working in the garden. It could be tutoring someone. It's something where you're doing some labor. You should really try to do it every day. Try to hit every day those three things. So we've changed it to 3 boxes of life to the 3 L's: learning, leisure, and labor.
One of the things that we loved as we went through this, thinking that retirement was exclusively about leisure, forget about labor and learning, we came across this wonderful cartoon by Bill Watterson of Calvin and Hobbes fame, where where the caption reads, "There's never enough time to do all the nothing you want." I don't know about you guys, but I think that's a pretty profound thought. So we wanted to be sure to share it with you this evening. And the more and more we thought about it, the ability to do nothing is very, very difficult. I was talking to Andy the other day, and I said, "What are you doing?" He says, "I'm not doing anything. I'm doing nothing." And I said, where are you? And he said, he's in his recliner. I says, well, being in your recliner is actually doing something. So this whole concept of doing nothing doesn't really apply. And Calvin and Hobbes kind of highlight that for us in we think a fairly comical and lighthearted way. But as we look at leisure, people sometimes say, boy, oh boy, I've got all this time on my hands. How am I going to figure out what I want to do? And that's a much more common question than many people think. Uh, Most people think it kind of comes naturally, and for many, it comes naturally for the first few weeks or few months of retirement, but it doesn't stay in that vein. It becomes a cause for either consternation or investigation, as the case may be. So as we studied retirement more and more, we thought it would be a good idea to kind of break this down into its elementary or elemental parts. And we thought one way we could do that is through a good old-fashioned flow chart, okay? Because as with everything else in life, there's a certain process that people can follow. You'll see starting at the top there where we ask if, are you interested in a leisure activity? You know, one of the answers is no, in which case this seminar gets very, very short. But if the answer is yes, then there are various options that are available to people as they investigate various types of leisure activities. And so you can see how the flow goes. And what we wanted to ensure was that the folks that we work with understand there is a flow to this, there is a process to it. But for purposes of leisure, it really comes down to a couple of different kind of classifications, actually around three at that, where there are group activities that provide opportunities for leisure outlets like sports and fitness or artistic ensembles or travel and tour, or even a book club for that matter. And then there are individual leisure activities that people can involve themselves in. And this is not obviously an either or type of proposition. Most people do a combination of these things. On the individual side, for example, physical fitness, artistic pursuits, various types of hobbies, arts and crafts, and among some of the younger baby boomers, which, by the way, do not include Andy and yours truly. There's gaming, which is bigger and bigger, it seems to me, all the time. If my daughter is any indication, and she's a Gen X person, so number of other individual activities would apply as well. But the other thing that we discovered was, from a leisure standpoint, volunteerism is huge. And for our purposes in this discussion of leisure, there are lots of different types of possibilities, as we see as the chart kind of winds around here, that range from civic engagement to political types of work, to working with youth or environmental concerns or religious, or humanitarian pursuits. So for many people, volunteerism is actually a leisure type of activity. But once again, what we wanted to do is help people to take the guesswork out of how to make sense of the three L's, and we've got flow charts for each of these three.
I mean, just a comment I'll make. I mean, it appears very complicated. It looks, you may, depending on your screen, you may not be able to see it as well, but it's just it's a process like anything else. You just got to think through it and figure out what would make sense. And we just tried to put it in a visual form of what would be logical. The good news is that there are tons of resources. Doing the research, I did a fair amount, extensive research on what's out there. The internet is terrific and is able to come up with things. And because there's so many baby boomers, the number of these groups have started to form that provide activities, leisure activities, volunteer activities. One of them is, and let me just go click on this and you can sort of see, one of them is AARP. If you haven't been involved with AARP and don't belong, you should, because it is I think, very good organization for information and what's out there. Besides Medicare, et cetera, they're very good at that. But it is something that you can get access to. So there's an experience. One of their programs that they started a number of years ago was volunteering with something they're calling Experience Corps. And they list all different cities that they involved in. Let me pick one here, Philadelphia, which is near New Jersey. There's appear to be one in New Jersey at this point. But they started it in 1996, and the whole purpose of this is tutoring programs in the schools. They found that if you can engage the students from a reading standpoint, tutoring them to be able to get their reading and literacy performance up, that they do improve. So in this case, this was from 2018, 17-18 school year, 7,100 students, 360 volunteers, 98,000 hours of tutoring. So if that's something that you'd be interested in doing, there's absolutely no reason why you can't do that. I like this organization called Encore, which is an organization, again, that's talking about trying to connect the older generation to the newer generation. They have found that it's very beneficial to both parties to be able to connect together. If you think about back in the 1800s, people who were older didn't stay on their own. They ended up living with their kids, which meant they lived with the grandchildren. And they would impart a number of the knowledge that they had over the years with that younger generation. So there was tremendous value. We, because of the way society is at this point, don't do that. So this is an opportunity, definitely an opportunity. This fellow, Mark Friedman, is the one that started the Encore organization. So here, it's called Gen to Gen. You can sign up and figure out a way that you can connect with the older generation and the younger generation. And I think it benefits both parties. That's for sure. Reserve is another one I thought was interesting. It's again volunteering for nonprofits. I've been involved most of my career, most of my life in Boys and Girls Clubs of America, but Boys and Girls Clubs on a local level in New Jersey where I was. But I also got involved at a national level. And I think it's a great organization, but they need and want people who have other kinds of experiences to be able to, Rick, here is, I didn't realize this, here is the number for number of individuals that turn 65. It's right here on this site.
Oh, yeah.
You see, but what they talk about is various places you can get involved. And they match you to these reservists, which are people who are willing and interested in doing. Some of you may be familiar with SCORE, which is a way for people who are starting out businesses to connect with a person that is in your area or something that you. I mean, the amount of information is, I think, absolutely amazing that exists out there. One I should mention, it's called a Career Explorer. Some of you may be not totally aware or thinking about what you can do, what your skill set is. And this is an organization started by a company called So Can You. And it allows you to take a very short quiz. There's no charge for it, but it talks about how to just start the thought process of what are your skill sets and what you can do. Now, it's for a variety of age groups, but it is also very important, I think, even at this age, you could have been whatever you were in your profession, but didn't realize that there are some transferable skills you can move into something else. So that's something that you can take a look at it as well. So all this information that we talked about today, everything that we have is we did last year wrote a book, Make Retirement Work, which goes into more detail the types of things that we talked about today, and it's now available on Amazon, both in paper as well as on Kindle, electronic, if you're interested. And a lot of the resources we have Rick, what would you say? I don't know how many pages we have of resources that people can get exposed to, from education to learning to volunteering, whatever it might be. Anything to add, Rick?
No, not other than the resource section of this book is particularly rich and varied. So I can just about guarantee you that regardless of which phase of retirement you're either in or contemplating, there'll be resources that actually Andy has vetted and that we've included in the book for your further investigation.
So, Colin, are you there? We can take questions now if you have some that people have typed in.
Absolutely. Yeah, we do have some questions that have been coming through here. So just as a reminder to all our attendees, you can still submit questions or comments through the chat feature, the Q&A feature in the lower right-hand portion of your screens. Let's get to a couple of questions now, gentlemen. So one, I think probably at the top of everybody's minds in one form or another, but if you could share your thoughts on the COVID impact on retirement timeframes, but also in terms of activities. How can we find balance in such uncertain times, especially with this concept of, social distancing and how that may impact being able to be out in public, but also socializing with the environment.
Well, as this is Andy, I think as many people are, we are trying to figure out how to do that. We've been having, where I live now in Delaware, we've been having happy hours, but it's distancing on decks. So we're still happy houring, but just in a different form. I don't think it's specific to retirees. I think it's just the whole society. We're going to have to try to figure out something new and how we're going to do that. When it comes to work itself, if you're interested in doing work or volunteering, it's going to be the similar process than if it was a full-time job opportunity. It's going to be changed that much. There are going to be changes in opportunity. When one industry is going to be down, another industry is going to pick up. There could be just saw in the local paper here in Delaware that they are looking for people to man the phones because they're going to try to figure out where these hotspots are to talk to people. And it's a part-time job that you can work from your home, so that something that would help society, you can also make a couple of dollars. I mean, there are going to be a number of things. I think the other thing I noticed that the Small Business Administration is looking for, I don't know how many people to help them get forms filled out for people to be able to get assistance. So there's opportunity. You have to look around and you have to talk to people and find out what you're interested in and try to go that direction.
Yeah, I think one of the keys is taking the time to kind of figure out where your interests lie, and that's nothing that self or social distancing would get in the way of per se. I'm not suggesting that most people rush into retirement, because I think most people probably don't rush into retirement. Based on the folks that the clients that Andy and I have worked with and that Colin has worked with, there's a tendency not to take the time to reflect on what one's true interests actually are. That Career Explorer tool that Andy mentioned a little while ago can be very, very valuable, and I might say surprising in some ways. You know, your retirement age, and you might not even realize that you have an interest in a particular subject area or occupational area or what have you. So this is a good time to think. It's a good time to read. It's a good time to reflect. And I happen to believe that where these types of transitions are concerned, the more of that work that we do up front, the smoother the transition and the fuller, more satisfying that transition becomes.
I also think, Rick, with this whole COVID and changing in the economy, you need to prepare, because it may not be you're interested in retiring, but the company you work for may be forcing you to move to that retirement phase or to the next phase. So it's a great opportunity now during this period to really try to do some reflection and figure out what you want. I'll make one particular story I thought was interesting. There's a guy who was a senior executive who had retired and wanted to do something, but he had a big job responsibility, a lot of things that he was doing, but he loved the outdoors. So he retired and tried a few things that didn't quite work out, and then through networking found an opportunity at a local park that was looking for someone to work 4 hours a day riding an ATV on trails to make sure that they were maintained, there was no washouts, to make sure people were safe, they were walking on the trails. Well, he thought this was the best job in the world, and they even paid him minimum wage. He was in heaven. It was a perfect opportunity, and he basically found his.
That's a great example, actually, Andy, of how happenstance, but you position yourself for the right circumstances to appear in front of you as well, by positioning yourself for success in that way. And same as we do in our careers, I think that translates over to how we position ourselves for retirement as well. We have a few more questions in here. So one seems to any advice you might have for folks who are looking to relocate and have.
Colin, you have to repeat that. It came up garbled. It must be the internet.
I apologize for that. So our question is about relocating during retirement. Any advice that you could share with folks who may be looking to relocate in retirement, and how some of this pre-planning and consideration around making retirement work can come into play with a relocation?
Relocation. I mean, I think that's everyone's personal preference. I mean, I've always, spend a lot of time doing research. One of the things that I thought was always interesting is to get exposed to the local paper, subscribe to it. You can do it electronically now from where you are if you're interested in different areas. Um, Again, you've got to kind of get a feel for the environment. What's the environment like? What's the economics? Besides physically where you're going to live, but what's the politics? What kind of restaurants are there? Things that I think would make sense. So it's always a transition. Some people try it; they don't necessarily buy something right away. They rent something for a period of time, spend 3 weeks. Once this pandemic goes away, Airbnbs are great. You can actually say, "I'd like to stay 3 weeks," and they'll give you a great price in some location, just to get an idea of what it's like. Go to the local coffee shops and bars and try to figure out what the environment's like. That I think is probably would make tons of sense. So anything to add, Rick?
Yeah, I think there's a very, very valuable resource right in front of us here with the Rutgers University Alumni Association.
Good point.
Rutgers alumni are all over the world, and I've never seen a case where one Scarlet Knight isn't willing to talk to another Scarlet Knight, as a matter of fact. So that in itself is a great resource and will help to provide kind of a personal dimension of what it's like to live in a particular location. So, for example, if I wanted to live in Delaware and I happen to know that there was a fellow by the name of Andy Gogates who lived in Delaware, I would make contact with Andy Gogates through the Alumni Association. So that's really a valuable resource. And if you happen to be an alumnus or an alumna of an institution, either in addition to or other than Rutgers University, virtually all colleges and universities have alumni associations with the express purpose of helping people make connections. And the other one, kind of the old-fashioned way of getting the information, is with either local board of realtors in the location that you may be interested in, or the local chamber of commerce. But I think that the best among those is the Alumni Association itself. And Colin might want to comment on that, since it's a big part of what you do, right, Colin?
It is. Thank you for that plug there, Rick. But yeah, absolutely. We have regional groups and charter clubs really throughout the country and the world, even to some extent. And as Rick said, alumni are always willing to talk with alumni and help alumni. And so when you're looking to get some of that experience, as Andy was referring to, a great way to do it is that kind of informational interview piece where you can connect with individuals along the lines of being Rutgers alums, and get a sense of the climate out there, beyond just the weather climate that is, and see how that might fit with what your overall goals, aspirations, activities, and things of that sort are. So, looking at it through learning through experience in a few different ways, whether personally visiting and spending some time, or learning through others' experience as well, but both certainly being valuable. And if you're looking for ways to connect with the Alumni Association, ralumni.com, the letter R, alumni.com, is a great way to get started. You can see different events, networking opportunities, lists of clubs and organizations, and various affiliations that you might wish to take advantage of. Moving on to a few more questions that we have here. And Andy, if you could just go back to the resources slide, if you
Sure.
have things
Yep, there it is. Yep, right here.
through the or Rutgers alumni YouTube.
Colin, you're breaking up again.
Okay, thank
No, still not connecting. Technology is great when it works.
with
I don't know if it's on my end or on your end. Rick, can you hear me all right?
No, unfortunately, cannot.
Maybe it's me.
here's that that you go about making.
One more time, Colin. I heard how you go about making.
Yeah, about 5 years from retirement, how making some of these difficult decisions when you have property. What kind of strategies or exercises?
Well, I'll take a stab at that. I'm not exactly sure that I got the question in entirely, but I did get the how you go about part of it. And one of the things we advise students to do is to overcome their reluctance to reach out to people for information and guidance. It doesn't matter if it happens to be a senior executive or an author of a book or a magazine article or whatever the case may be. In many cases, people who are out there putting information into the public domain or who otherwise are available are only too happy to respond to questions that are courteously posed and that are acknowledged as hopefully being helpful. So I'm not exactly sure if that was the question or not, but um, this is not a time to be bashful about reaching out
True.
for information. And the way you pay that back is when you're the one that gets asked for information and help and guidance, then you provide it. So it's not any more complicated than that. If I got the essence of the question.
I think you did. Not sure. Can you hear me any better now?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Perfect. We can hear you great. I apologize for that. Not sure what the disturbance was there. But yeah, you got the essence of the question. Perfect. You know, it's about making those difficult decisions when you have so many choices potentially in front of you. You know, looking at retirement options. As one of those options that may come up, if you're considering something like an encore career, how do you recommend kind of facing, you know, ageism or preconceived notions that some might have about hiring someone who is in a more advanced stage of life?
Well, I put on my recruiter hat. I believe, first of all, you don't have to mention anything or apologize for your age. It is what it is. I really think you need to focus on what are the job requirements, what are they looking for, and be able to sell yourself on having those requirements. You know, if in fact there is ageism, if there is some sort of a bias, it's going to happen and you can't control it. But I believe if you can sell yourself onto what you are capable of doing, what you have done in the past, what you've been successful at, which is what you would talk about, Rick would talk about with his current students, of what you have done and how you can help the company in the future. Uh, the other is I will not emphasize enough about networking. You know, there are people that I've met that are 40 years old that I don't think they could be 70. They just don't have the right mindset. Many of the people that I've met that are 65 and above, I'm 67. You know, it depends on the individual. But if you get to meet the person in person, I was going to say shake their hand, but we can't do that anymore. But if you can meet them, at least have a conversation with them, it makes a big difference in selling yourself. And I'll mention that it's not only at the job level where you're getting paid, but even at the nonprofit level. They have a tremendous need, but it's just like looking for a job. You need to sell yourself on your skill set, whatever it might be. You know, many of the nonprofits are not geared that well to knowing what to do with you. So some of it is you almost have to tell them what you're going to be good at and how you can do it. Um, Anything to
Would
add, Rick?
suggest too, there's no better antidote for age preparation. Um, if a given individual, retiree or about to be retiree, boomer, if you will, is interested in working in a certain capacity for a certain organization, the more they know about uh, the the position that they're interested in, like Andy says, the contribution they're able to make, and about the employing organization itself, the more convincing they can be as one who will likely bring value to that organization despite one's age per se. So the better prepared one is in the whole process of introducing oneself to a prospective new employer, the better. And that's where even brand new graduates tend to have difficulty. They try to wing it, and that usually doesn't work. But if you study an organization, especially if you study recent news coverage on that organization, and you're able to bring that into your conversation with that prospective employer, then that can be very helpful. The other thing too that huge antidote is if you can get referred to a prospective employer from someone who that employer already knows and has trust and confidence in, that will break that age barrier down very, very quickly because you're being endorsed right from the get-go. So that reinforces what Andy's talking about here in terms of networking.
One other thing I'll bring up, and that's of course, Rick, where the alumni can come into play. You can develop a relationship with alumni, and they can refer you to some potential employers. That also works. The other thing you have in your favor is, if you remember the chart I showed you in the beginning, there were 10 million fewer babies born in the United States on the next generation, the jobs that are going to be available. And so there is going to be opportunity. There's not enough human beings to fill slots. We'll spend a time talking to a woman who was a fairly senior executive at Exxon in Houston a couple of years ago, and she was amazed. She had a job open for a mid-level manager, and she said not one person applied for the job. Now, it's Exxon, it's in Houston, but not one person applied. So I said, well, it's beginning. The starting process of there's just not enough people, not just qualified people, not enough people to be sitting in the seats. So just keep that in mind as you move. Be aggressive. I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
So confidence, preparation, leveraging your strengths, knowing where to seek the opportunities, and similar as to almost any other job search in a sense. But looking at how you actually leverage the experience that you probably do have at this point in your life and your career as a real asset for you, and that others can benefit from that wisdom and expertise that you're bringing to the table. As making a little bit of a segue, we got two questions left here. So, sometimes I've heard it described that networking and interviewing, even job searches, sometimes can almost be parallel to the dating world. And we have a question about dating. So, your thoughts on dating in the post-retirement box?
Rick, I'm going to hand that over to you.
Well, I'm no expert on dating per se, but I would suggest that probably the common denominator in all this is finding or learning about common values, common interests, and having a willingness to communicate one's interests, and the ability to make a meaningful contribution to the relationship. I would also caution about making quick jumps, because some jobs are seemingly readily available when there may be better jobs available if you do a little bit more investigation. Of course, that term "better" is a loaded term, realize, but even now we're telling students in this unfortunate environment within which they're graduating, to still be discriminating to a certain extent, because where you start sometimes determines kind of where you finish. So you need to be somewhat strategic as far as that's concerned. But I would hesitate mightily to put myself out there as an expert on dating. I'm still trying to figure out this retirement stuff. So
I think as I mentioned to people, I think the easiest way, as you're going through this and you're trying to find your IKIGAI and you're getting involved with various organizations, you're meeting people with like interests. That's really how it operates. I'm not an expert either. married to the same woman for 40 some years. 40, she's not here, that's just good. 46 years, I think. And so it's a long, it's a long road to haul. But I think people I've seen successful are those that join an organization, get involved, and it's like-minded. And you're looking for a relationship. It's not necessarily forever. It's just you like the company of other
And Andy, you brought up the connection there kind of with Ikigai. So as we take our last question, um, what are some exercises or approaches, strategies that individuals might be able to take in order to help them really connect with and find what that Ikigai is for them? I know you'd mentioned like So Can You and the Career Explorer. Maybe if you could talk a little bit more just about some exercises to assist with that portion.
I don't know if there's exercises. I think there's things like Rick. What's the name of that? It's occupational outlook.
Occupational Outlook Handbook.
Handbook. Yeah. What it is it's compiled by the uh, is it the Department of Commerce, I believe, and it lists every job that exists in the United States. So if you want to go through that exercise, and it's done by, it's separated by various, I'm sure you can find it online, but it's an exhaustive list of everything. It talks about compensation, responsibility, requirements. And it's a great way to kind of just look through and say, what am I good at? What would I be interested in? Or a job that you didn't even know that existed. The other day I was walking by a dam, and there was a woman that was counting the fish that were in an area that they had cordoned off because she was from the Fish and Wildlife, because they wanted to know how many fish came up this fish ladder. I didn't know that job existed, and she had a net, and she was throwing some one way and some the other way. Well, I mean, that's a job that could be very enticing. She seemed to have a blast at it. So it depends on, you've got to investigate. I think you have to look at various jobs, talk to a lot of people. What do they do? How do they do it? And then look at yourself. Some of the things that people aren't aware of is ask other people what they think you're good at. Because you may not think you're that organized, but you are very organized. And people would value that. And you can use that in looking for your next opportunity.
I think too, for those who believe in some Eastern approaches to this, um, Zen philosophy kind of comes to mind, where, for example, when you're in the beginning throes of this decision making process, uh, go somewhere that's quiet and listen to what your head is telling you. Don't try to control the thought processes. Just see kind of what comes in. Reflect. And most of us don't reflect because most of us don't have time to reflect. Most of us are working or preparing for retirement or engaged with any number of family activities and so forth. But some say, particularly of a Zen type of persuasion, that if you listen to yourself, you'll find the answers. And so I don't want to go too far down that road, but I think it's an option for people. And I certainly do believe that if you do take the opportunity to do some reflection in terms of what really might appeal to you and who you might know to help you reach your retirement objectives, it will be time very, very well spent.
I think also you need to try things. I mean, don't be afraid to give something a try. And some of the jobs, or if you think you really do want to do some work, and if you have the opportunity, volunteer first. Sometimes there's positions out there that they don't really have a job, but they need some volunteers. Well, volunteer. First of all, you see if you like it. And second of all, it may turn into something. The opportunities have turned into that. And if you have the time and you have you can afford it, give that a try. Try those first, because you can, I think I'd always wanted to be involved in the police department. Well, do they have volunteers? Something that you can do. Maybe you can work on community part-time, directing traffic or whatever it might be, to see if in fact this is what you like, and to see the people that are involved. There are opportunities out there. You just have to, don't be afraid to give them a try.
And I think that's the one of the best pieces of advice is to go forward without the fear, because as any transition in life occurs, there's always some anxiety, some trepidation around it, and so I think that's a perfect note to end on. To go forward bravely, in pursuit of your goals, your dreams, the retirement that you ultimately want to have for yourself. So with that, I'd really like to thank Rick and Andy so much for your insights, your wisdom, and this program that you put forth for Rutgers alumni tonight. I'd like to thank all of our attendees as well. Just as a reminder, the recording of this program will be published online on our ralumni.com/career resources website, as well as our Rutgers Alumni YouTube channel. Thank you all again. I hope you continue to be safe and well, and we'll see you next time. Good night.
Thank you very much.